Hello book people, I'm back with another video and today I'm going to be showing you my 5-star reads so far this year. I have rated 9 books 5 stars, which I think is pretty good because usually I think that books sort of are either good or not great, but they're never like great. And this year I've just had quite a few great reads or, beyond great, amazing reads. And so I wanted to share them with you today just for fun. I am gonna go straight into the books. The first book that I rated 5 stars, which I think I read in February, was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I really connected with this one, and I really connected with the format. It's really interestingly written. It's sort of like almost like vignettes, and it's broken up into Dream House as something, almost like tropes, but not quite. For example, Dream House as world building, Dream House as set design, Dream House as creature feature. And you can have, a page of writing, or a page and a little bit, or not even half a page. And I just thought that it was such an interesting format for a book. And I also thought that the story that Machado is telling is just very heartbreaking, but also in some ways a little uplifting. And weirdly enough, before I read this book, before I had even really known what it was about, I thought that it was a horror, like a collection of horror short stories, and each chapter was a different horror trope. And I have no idea where I got that idea from, and that is not what this is. But it is a little bit unsettling at times because of what it's about. I believe it's about Carmen's own experiences as a gay woman dating and being in an abusive relationship with their female partner. So it's not something you see very often. I think that typically violence against women, generally the perpetrator that is most often seen is a man, but this is about domestic abuse between two women. So it's a very, very touching story, and again, the format of it is just so beautiful, and I was just completely taken with this book from the first page to the last. I have so many annotations, and there were so many conversations in this that I just couldn't stop thinking about. I was reading it and I was just so stuck on some of the topics being brought up and how important they were, and a lot of conversation around being gay and just conversation around the LGBTQ plus community in general. So it was a really, really great read, and I think I'd want to reread it just to sort of relive the impact that it had, because I feel like this is a book that you can't really read once and get the full scope of it. So hopefully I will pick it up again, but not this year because I've already read it this year, but sometime in the future. The next book that I rated 5 stars was Anxious People by Fredrik Backman, which I mentioned in a previous video, so I won't go like super crazy in depth about it, but this was a book that my friend recommended to me and essentially pulled it off a bookshelf and said, okay, you're reading this. And I went with it. That was sort of this brief period of only really reading library books, which I think that lasted for about 3 books before I started reading my own personal collection again. But it was such a fun book. It was a really fun reading experience. And honestly, from what I remember, I think it was like one of the first few chapters that it had me almost in tears because of how sad it was. Or not even just sad, but just, and I feel like I keep saying this, but like just very touching. So I think that Anxious People, the reason that I gave it a 5 stars just was because I feel like I really emotionally connected to it, and the fact that it was so character driven and about community and people coming together and just people's relationships with one another, and how, a single event that a group of people are involved in can, spark a bunch of different relationships. And it was just a really very interesting book, quite unlike anything I've read before. And what I know of Fredrik Backman is that he's an amazing writer and that people love his books, and I know that some of my favorite YouTubers, booktubers. Really, really like some of his other books. So I think I'd like to pick up another one of his books because it was just so completely out of left field for me. I wasn't expecting to read it. I wasn't expecting to like it. I just sort of picked it up. But now that I have, I want to like read his other books and just get that full emotional experience that everyone else seems to be getting. But that's Anxious People. The next book, which I have not shut up about since I read it, is Priory of the Orange Tree. And I think I have brought it up in every single video I've made so far, which is not very many, but I'm pretty sure I brought it up quite often. It was a huge book, and I kind of started off my year reading it, and I could not be happier that I did so. It took me, I think, a month in total to finish it. Actually, a day shy of a month, I think. And it was just so amazing. I was just fully immersed in it the whole time. And yeah, you know, sometimes it was a little hard to pick up, but I loved it so much. It was so much fun. I met so many fun characters in that book. And I think that so far my like top read of the year has to be Priory of the Orange Tree because it was just so amazing. I loved the story and I loved the characters and I loved how vivid it was. I feel like the writing was very much above most of what I read now, just the quality of it, and the setting and the character. Everything about that book was amazing. And I've heard people say, oh, well, it doesn't have much of a plot and blah, blah, blah. But like, you're in it and there's so much going on and it's just like, there's so much there. All of the critiques that I have seen don't really make sense to me. And I think that it is just so good. There's something in it for everybody, you know. It's a little bit disturbing at times, but you have like a little bit of romance and there's action and adventure and like it's funny. There's so much good in that book, which makes me so excited to read the second one. I can't wait to pick it up. I don't know when I'm gonna do that, but I can't wait. But yeah, Priory of the Orange Tree was easily a 5 stars. If I could rate it any higher than that, I would. The next book was Babel by R.F. Kuang, which was my first R.F. Kuang book, and I have only ever heard good things about every single book that she's released. And I own all of her books, at least as far as I know. I have the Poppy War trilogy back there, which they're in the wrong order. Please don't call me out about that. I know they're in the wrong order. I just do not have the willpower to rearrange them. And I have Babel, and I just recently got a copy of Yellowface. So I want to read all of her stuff. At least I'm pretty sure that's everything that she's released. And Babel was just so amazing. I mean, how could you read Babel and not rate it a 5 stars? It's telling a really important story, I think, and the magic system is really interesting, and the way that it just explores language and people and different languages, connections to one another, linguistics, I guess. It's really, really just interesting, and it was written so beautifully. And I really felt myself falling in love with all of the characters. There were certain times where maybe certain betrayals happened or certain moments happened that had an emotional impact, and I was just like completely broken. I saw people like getting to the end of that book and like crying their eyes out. Now, I wasn't really at that level of upset after reading it, but I definitely put it down and like stared off for a few minutes because it definitely leaves a mark when you finish it. And I'm currently lending out my copy, same as Priory of the Orange Tree. I kind of have a little bit of like a library system going. My friends borrow books from me all the time. But Babel was so good. The next book is Night Watching by Tracy Sierra, which I read with the Literally Dead book club, and I think that was the March pick or the April pick. I can't remember. It was so good. That book was... I did not expect to rate it 5 stars, but I thought that it was really good. It did something that most thrillers I have read recently have not been able to do. And I thought that it was such a disturbing read, and there were so many times while I was reading it, and I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. How is this happening right now? The interaction between our main character and the police was the most distressing thing I have read in my entire life. I was literally sitting there staring at my Kindle thinking, how are people like this? How is this happening? This woman is clearly in distress, and no one is helping her. And I think one of the most frustrating things in any sort of media is when the police are just like not paying attention to the person who needs help. On a separate note, I just watched Barbarian, And there's a similar moment in that movie where this girl is like asking for help from the police, and because of the areas she's in, they're like, "You're crazy. There's nothing going on. You're crazy. Like, you are breaking the law right now." And she's like, "I am breaking the law to try and save myself and this other guy." And they're like, "No, you're breaking the law and you're crazy." So that is probably the most frustrating thing ever for me to read, and I feel like it really enhanced the book because it was just so frustrating, and you're really right there with the main character, whose name I'm forgetting right now. And yeah, that book just, like, it had me in its trap. I could not put it down. And I think that so far, out of all the book club reads this year, that one has been my favorite. I also thought that the perpetrator, like the reveal of the perpetrator, was really interesting. Usually, I'm a little bit skeptical of certain circumstances. I don't want to give away anything, but the way in which the perpetrator is revealed, I thought was really well done. And usually there have been other books that have done it in a similar way that I haven't enjoyed as much, but I think that this one did it really well. So I think that that is probably my favorite thriller of the year. The next book is Pattern Recognition by William Gibson. This book was another recommendation to me by my partner, and now we have 2 copies. He's got one that's a lot bigger, and then I have this one that we found at a bookstore, and I was reading it at the time, and I was like, this is a much better size of a book for me. It's just like pocket sized, which I really liked. But this, again, not something I'd expect to read. A lot of my friends' recommendations take me completely out of my comfort zone, and this is no exception. I had not read any William Gibson. I'm not really into sci-fi. It was just like so fun. And also William Gibson's writing is incredibly vivid. So the entire time I'm reading it, even if I'm sort of unsure about what was going on, I could picture things really well. And I had to ask a lot of questions because I think that some of it does get a little bit confusing. But I think that books that make you ask questions are the books that are worthwhile, because how else are you going to learn and broaden your reading skills if you aren't asking questions? So this was definitely something that sort of pushed me. This took me out of my comfort zone, and I can't thank it enough. It was a great book, and I would love to read other William Gibson books. I have access to a whole bunch of them through my partner because he's like obsessed with William Gibson. So it's always worthwhile to go out of your comfort zone. Whether the book is good or bad, you're always getting something new. You're always learning more about yourself. And I think that the lesson in reading this one was that, again, it took me out of my comfort zone, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I learned a whole lot. So I think that this was just really amazing. And I think Case as a main character was just so much fun to follow. I thought she was great. The next book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which I had to read for a class. It was a strenuous experience because it's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley and it is hard to read. I am a big reader. I love reading. I read classics. I do. But this was like extra hard for some reason. But the feeling after finishing it was so rewarding, and also once you get to a certain point, you're grasping the language a bit more and you're grasping the writing style. And I found when I really hit the point where I could fully understand what was going on and fully understand the language, I just was so into it. I don't think that it's a 5-star. I don't necessarily think it's like my favorite or like the most wowing book ever, because, you know, it is a story that has been retold so many times. But I think that there is something about classics specifically that just have such a wonderful quality to them, and they really do leave a lot of room to broaden vocabulary and, you know, broaden your ability to read in general. And I think that this was more of a 5-star experience. I mean, obviously the writing is great and the story is great, but I think a lot of the conversation I had in class and the experience of reading it was what gave it the 5-star, not necessarily the book itself, which is a little silly. But yeah, thinking back on it now, I think it's probably more of a 4-star, but I don't know. I think that because of the journey it took me on, it is a 5-star. The next book is another book for class, which is great that pretty much all of the books I read for class are 5 stars, other than Animal Farm, which was not my favorite. But the next one is The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga, which I hope I am pronouncing correctly. The White Tiger Another, and I keep saying this, and I think that it's great to see on my list of 5 stars that I am being taken out of my comfort zone. The White Tiger is another book that I probably wouldn't have picked up by myself, but reading in class really gave me the motivation to read it and to finish it, and I enjoyed it so much. It felt like a really fresh sort of story to read, and also the fact that, it's slightly comedic, and you have like this, I don't even think your protagonist is sort of an antagonist in a way. He's just like, I don't really want to call him an anti-hero because I feel like he doesn't do all that much good, but at the same time, he's bettering his own life. Anyway, you follow Balaram. He kind of grows up in a slum with a poor family, and it speaks a lot about the caste system in India, which I didn't really know a whole lot about, but reading the book, it kind of just opened up this whole new world of information for me. And so there is a whole lot of talk around poverty and the caste system, as I said, and just the difference between the poor and the rich. So Balaram, who, again, he lives in poverty, he basically just like fights to become a driver for this rich family. And it sort of just goes from there. He talks about becoming an entrepreneur and doing something that most of the time the people who are poor in India just cannot do. According to the caste system, if you are of a lower caste, you do not move out of that. You cannot become any higher. So Balaram is kind of going against everything that people believe in and sort of bringing himself up to this higher level. But he does a lot of really terrible things, and he's kind of like a bad person. It calls into question people's morals, I think, and your own morals as you're reading it, because you're like, he's fighting to live better, but he's also like doing horrible things. So it's a great book that makes you ask a lot of questions. And I watched the film as well, which I have to say I enjoyed the book a lot more, but I really, really love the acting in the film. And yeah, that was just like such a fun experience, and I got to do a little bit of work on it in class, and I thought that it was just like, in terms of like reading material for a class, I think that was very, very well chosen. And the last book is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which how could this not be here? This was a very quick read for me, and I'm sure it's a quick read for most people, but this was pretty devastating and also not what I was expecting. And I don't really have a whole lot to say other than this was absolutely beautiful and takes you to a lot of emotional places that I think you kind of have to be prepared for, because I wasn't super prepared. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but it's an emotional journey, and it's very, very, very unapologetic in the way that it approaches certain conversations. And I think that this is such an important book, and it touches on some very like important internal conversations. And again, just it was very beautiful, and a lot of the way that it was written was beautiful. A lot of the conversations were so wonderful to read, and I thought that the beginning when David and Giovanni first meet, and they're just sort of like, they've got this back and forth sort of banter, I thought was just so great. I loved the way that they talked to one another in the beginning. Of course, it does end up devolving a little bit, but I thought that this was just so beautiful and so well written and very, very emotional. But yeah, I don't know how this could be 5 stars. It's just amazing. So that is all that I have for this video. That is my 9 5-star reads of the year so far, and I am sure that I will have many more by the end of the year, so I can update this later. But yeah, that's all the books. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you choose to join me again. If you would like to, you can always subscribe to my channel. And if you want to see more of me, I have an Instagram account where I post about all different bookish things, and a Goodreads where you can follow my reading journey a little bit closer. And yeah, thank you for joining me today.